You just weighed in on these goals. Now with these goals in mind, we're going to explore some prototypes intended to be a general representation of State Street now and how it could be in the future, not tomorrow or next year, but several decades out. So here's a prototype representing State Street's current condition. In general, buildings are back from the street, and the streetscape is characterized by parking lots and large signs. Just beyond commercial uses along the street, there may be single-family homes or townhomes. Codes were recently updated. As a result, as parcels redevelop over time, buildings will generally move up to embrace the street, and parking lots will move to the back or sides of buildings. Outside of the districts that our vision identifies, this is generally how State Street will evolve over time. Now switch gears and think about the following images on the next slides with the 5 districts and our goals in mind. These are the places where we are choosing to focus our growth, our needs for housing, jobs, and destinations that enhance our quality of life. So, 4 options for the 5 district areas where we'll focus most of our growth in coming decades. This is option A. You can see that the buildings begin to form an edge or wall along State Street, making it feel more comfortable for pedestrians. You can think of this almost like creating a room out of a street. It gets more comfortable for walking. We also start to see smaller, more walkable blocks emerge and several plazas, places to hang out. New housing includes green spaces like a neighborhood park and shady streets and sidewalks. You can see condos and townhomes buffering State Street's commercial uses, and finally, single-family homes at the top of the image buffering new development from adjacent single-family neighborhoods. Option B. In this image, we see mixed-use buildings forming edges all the way around the small blocks that line State Street, making for more interesting blocks to walk along, better than walking along the edges of parking lots or around large signs. Behind the blocks that line State Street, we see residential blocks that begin to significantly expand housing options available to future Orem residents. You can see a mix of townhomes, condos, apartments, and also single-family homes along the back, a buffer for adjacent neighborhoods. Option C. In this image, the buildings in the blocks adjacent to State Street contain a mix and intensity of uses such that the centers of the blocks include parking garages. Note that when we go to structured parking, the efficiency that provides gives us space for more plazas and green areas in the blocks. Again, in the blocks just off State Street, you see neighborhoods with somewhat more apartments as some of the buildings get taller. Single-family homes still provide a buffer between new development and existing residential neighborhoods. In option D, we see little change in the residential buildings toward the back of the image. The building with the condos and apartments next to the street gets taller. But mostly we see an increase in the intensity of the buildings in the blocks lining State Street. Their heights increase, as do the capacity of their parking decks. This is the most urban of the images. You can probably think of a handful of places along the Wasatch Front with this scale of infill. Nonetheless, the green space network of plazas, parks, and shady streets and sidewalks remains, creating an interesting and beautiful experience for people. Just to show you that quickly, a typical green space network along State Street. Here streets get greener and park space expands. And finally, we see a stronger network of connected parks, plazas, and streets, and other uses also intensify. When we focus our growth, we can reserve land for fun outdoor gathering areas. Also, here's just a quick look at a prototypical existing condition along State Street. And here's an image that captures how things could look as buildings embrace the street, as street trees, sidewalks, and plazas develop, creating a pleasant space for people on the ground and also drivers traveling the corridor. Now I want to show you another view of the same illustrations we just looked at. Instead of seeing State Street in the foreground, now it's in the back toward the lake. And the single-family residential that was in the back of the image is now in the front. So here's a view representing existing condition. Orem lies in such a beautiful setting, doesn't it? This shows changes that come about with recent code updates. Nothing changes in the foreground, but you see the blocks lining State Street begin to change as buildings move closer to the street. Then here are the images that represent options for our future districts. And again, these are simply concepts or prototypes to explore together so we can get an early sense of your preferences and refine the ideas accordingly. So here's option A, with more townhomes and condos, mixed use along State Street, a neighborhood park, and shady walkable streets. And option B, with more townhomes and condos and also now apartments, mixed use along State Street intensifies, and again we have a park and shady walkable streets. And in option C, the blocks fill in more along State Street with structured parking. We see townhomes, condos, and more apartments. That park, shady, walkable streets, they all remain, along with those plazas that aren't actually visible in this view. And finally, option D, with higher rise jobs and housing in the background along State Street. We still see single-family homes and townhomes, but also higher rise condos and apartments. The green space network remains. So take a look at these options. Overall, which is your favorite? Think about how we should grow, not overnight, but over the course of the next several decades. Think Orem in 2050 or 2060. And here's another view of those same options. And then a survey question.